news of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag. In the back it says USA. Won't buy nothing that he can't fix. With WD-40 and a Craftsman wrench, he ain't prejudiced. He's just made in America.
Welcome, North Carolina. This is Dr. Grace, your host. I'm the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, and I'm here to uphold values that will never die. We've got another great show lined up for you. We are going to be interviewing the one and only Mr. Jeffrey Cooner, a.k.a. my husband. He wrote a really great piece on Rand Paul and the infighting going on in the GOP. We're going to pick his brains on that. We're going to also count down the top 10 Jay Carney dodges and or lies. I'm looking forward to that. We are also going to be discussing Saul Alinsky and his 12 famous tactics. Those are the tactics that radicals use, and we need to know what they are so that we can see them and defend ourselves against them. But before we get to all of those great stories, I want to discuss the NSA scandal. There have been developments in the last couple of weeks that have been really worth analyzing. Edward Snowden has told us the government is out of control. They have the ability to collect phone records. They have ability to look into emails. He has told us do not believe what the government is saying. He has told us that they can do so even without a warrant, that they are slipshotty in the checks and balances, that Congress really has very little oversight over it, and that the program should stop. And he has told us that he's willing to do all of that with one request only, and that is that the American people do something about it. He doesn't want his sacrifice in vain. He is now up on espionage charges by the American government. And so his whole life has been turned upside down. He's done all of that for us to cry out, telling us, take a good look and put an end to it because your privacy rights are at stake and the Constitution itself is at stake. Well, big developments recently. There was a vote on the House floor in which, attached to an appropriations bill, an amendment was introduced, and that amendment was introduced by a Michigan representative, Justin Amash. And the issue before the House was, let's shut this program down. Let's have a vote on it. Sadly, the amendment was defeated. The vote went down 217 to 205. Yet, it's important that the vote was taken. And it is important that this issue continues to remain at the forefront of Americans. I want to take a look back for a few moments now, given everything that we know, at what President Obama told us on Charlie Rose when the scandal broke out. Remember, he told us that we needn't be alarmed and that the program was well worth keeping in place. Brittany, can you roll that clip?
Program number one, called the 2015 program. What that does is it gets data from the service providers, like a Verizon, in bulk. And basically, you have call pairs. You have my telephone number connecting with your telephone number. There are no names. There's no content in that database. All it is the number pairs, when those calls took place, how long they took place. So that database is sitting there. Now, if the NSA, through some other sources, maybe through the FBI, maybe through a tip that went to the CIA, maybe through the NYPD, gets a number that where there's a reasonable, articulable suspicion that this might involve foreign terrorist activity related to Al-Qaeda and some other international terrorist actors, then what the NSA can do is it can query that database to see, does this number pop up? Did they make any other calls?
So that's the president trying to lay out what most of us understood was the Patriot Act, that it was very limited and that it was very much controlled. Yet in that very same interview, he goes and he completely contradicts himself. Listen to this. Brittany, roll that clip.
When you start looking at metadata, even if you don't know the names, you can match it up. If there's a call to an oncologist and it's a call to a lawyer, and you can pair that up and figure out maybe this person's dying and they're writing their will, and you can yield all this information. All of that is true, except for the fact that for the government under the program right now to do that, it would be illegal. We would not be allowed to do that.
So what are you going to change? Are you going to issue any kind of instructions to the...
Well, you see, at first he was saying that, you know, it's not possible. It's very limited. And then in that very same interview, he talks about the people are saying, look, you can actually derive a lot of information about folks. You can pair up numbers. You can get information about who they're talking to, what they're talking about, etc. And he says, yeah, actually, it is possible to do that. But he just said earlier that it wasn't really possible to do that it was very limited. They say, yeah, sure, it's possible, but it's illegal. Oh, and now we're to believe that even if the government has all this power, even when it's possible, they won't do it? Just like they showed so much restraint when it came to tax-exempt status for conservative groups. Just like they were so accountable when it came to telling us what happened in Benghazi. Just like they showed so much restraint and due process when they went after Fox News reporter James Rosen. Just like they showed so much good judgment when they prosecuted the AP and all those reporters that were being scrutinized without just cause. So the president is basically now defending the indefensible. And the reason that the Amash Amendment was so important and the debate surrounding it was so important is that there were key people who came forward. People that have served in the highest, most secret areas of the government. They are Senators Ron Wyden, a Democrat, and Senator Mark Udall, another Democrat. They were both members, check this out, of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. And what did they say just when we were debating the Amash Amendment? They said that they had been warning for years, that they were trying to tell the executive branch, shut this program down, because the metadata program is actually going to threaten American liberties. Senator Ron Wyden said in a speech that the public was, quote unquote, actively misled about the metadata program, end of quote. He warned, quote, that the combination of increasingly advanced technology with a breakdown in the checks and balances that limit government action could lead us to a surveillance state that cannot be reversed. And that is a fellow Democrat. What you're seeing in this debate is that there are Democrats who are coming forward and they are saying we have to shut this program down. What's really interesting is that when the vote was taken, you had a fissure both within the Republican ranks and within Democratic ranks. Republicans broke 134 to 94 against the amendment, and Democrats split 111 to 82 in favor of the proposal. So what we're seeing is that there really is no clear-cut basic category as to which Republicans are standing up for liberty and which Democrats are standing up for liberty. The pattern doesn't have any ideological or a generational divide. But what we also saw is that there was a wholesale effort to stop Congress from shutting the program down. Suddenly, on the day that the amendment was being voted on, the White House issued a very panicked statement. You can't shut this down. American security will be threatened. They sent folks up to Capitol Hill trying to cajole congressmen. They said, listen, we're going to tell you all about the program. But what the Democratic senators sitting on the intelligence committees told us clearly and unequivocally is that the program lacks transparency. It will continue to lack transparency. This whole idea that we're going to have an honest debate about it is a lie. They don't want an honest debate about it. They have been stonewalling the conversation. They just want the program to continue unaltered. And shame on the Republicans who went along to uphold what is clearly a violation of the Constitution. All of us have to continue to fight this in order to preserve our freedoms. And we also have to continue to push against this notion that Edward Snowden is a traitor, that Edward Snowden is a culprit. As I've said over and over again, the man is a hero that we should put on all of our shoulders. Recently, you had an individual from a think tank, Mike O'Hanlon, on Fox News, stating again that we shouldn't trust Mr. Snowden. Roll that clip, Brittany.
Well, the way I would put it is I think Mr. Snowden lost his credibility as sort of a vigilante for justice and for open debate when he went over to China and told them some of what we had been doing. The Chinese listen to a lot of our communications. They steal a lot of our intellectual property over the telephones and over the computer. And we obviously try to watch what they're doing and reply. We don't steal their secrets the way they steal ours, but we do conduct espionage, I'm sure, by computer. And Snowden gave away some of that information in a situation where the Chinese, if anything, were committing much greater infractions than we were. So I've lost my ability to have even a begrudging respect for any contribution he's making to the debate, even though many do acknowledge that the debate, pieces of the debate are useful. The way Snowden has divulged secrets has been, I think, too indiscriminate and careless. And that's what his brief sojourn in China proved. Beyond that, I think the Chinese are hugely...
You know, this is just a big lie that keeps being peddled over and over again. Mr. Snowden didn't betray any vital secrets that put any Americans in harm's way. He has said over and over again that he loves this nation and the people who serve it way too much. We need to continue to push back against folks like Mike O'Hanlon and a bunch of others who are trying to tell us that it is okay for the government to spy on us. This will not stand. Our founding fathers are currently turning in their grave. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at World Tribune on WTSB.
Of the day with values that never die.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo in so much space. And when you're out there without care, yeah, I was out of touch. But it wasn't because I didn't know enough.
American Heartland with Dr. Grace. That's CeeLo Green going crazy because it is a crazy situation when you have the White House press secretary constantly lying to the American people. Jay Carney has recently been accused by Darrell Issa. He said, this guy is a quote-unquote paid liar. And you had some of the conservative press corps saying, how dare Darrell Issa call the White House press secretary a paid liar. Well, you know what? I thought the American people should judge for themselves. So I put together a list of top 10 Jay Carney dodges and or lies in front of the press. And at the end of that, we can ascertain whether or not Darrell Issa was right when he said that the White House press secretary is a paid liar. You know, the press secretary, he's supposed to speak for the president to the people. That is supposed to be an extremely honest and forthright conversation. One of the most disturbing things that I've seen during this administration is that very idea has degenerated badly. So much so, as you're going to hear in these clips, the press sometimes is mocking Mr. Carney. Sometimes they're outright laughing at him. So here we go. We're going to count down the top 10 Jay Carney dodges and or lies. Number 10, when Jay Carney was asked about Fast and Furious. Roll that clip, Brittany.
What the Department of Justice knew when they were giving false information to Congress?
First of all, I think that matter has been thoroughly discussed in congressional testimony, including 9 appearances by the Attorney General, including the 7,600 documents that have been provided.
And you know, it was full of lies. Many of the documents were actually being withheld, so much so that Congress held the Attorney General in contempt. Number 9, Jay Carney doesn't want to answer a simple question. What does the administration think the capital of Israel is?
What city does this administration consider to be the capital of Israel? Jerusalem or Tel Aviv?
I haven't had that question in a while. Our position has not changed, Connie. Can we...
What's the capital?
You know our position.
I don't.
No, she doesn't know. She doesn't know. That's why she asked.
She does know.
I don't.
She does not know. She just said she doesn't know.
We have long... Come on, I call on Christy. Go ahead. We didn't schedule, we didn't organize the conference. It was a very appropriate place to have that conversation.
Tel Aviv or Jerusalem?
You know the answer. Yeah.
We don't know the answer. We don't know the answer. Could you just give us an answer? What do you recognize? What does you recognize?
Our position hasn't changed. Thanks, everybody.
There was Jay Carney squirming, not wanting to answer the question. And there are members of the press coming to one another's defense. That was number 9. And then there is number 8.
Telling the truth
Jay
on that.
Carney
He was involved
having a debate
involved in what?
with Ed Henry on Eric Holder, whether or not he lied to Congress about the investigation on James Rosen. Roll that clip, Brittany.
He didn't even give us a unindicted code. Are you not involved after signing off on a search warrant?
I would refer you to the Justice Department. But you guys are conflating, the subpoena with prosecution, and I think that it is. Again, I would just point you to what the Attorney General said.
But so it is a technical accuracy you're holding on to.
I'm not. I'm saying that based on what I've seen in published reports and what the Attorney General said, I don't see the conflict. But I would refer you to the Justice Department.
There's the runaround. The Justice Department lies. The White House press secretary gives a defense, referring them back to the Justice Department. That's number 8. And number 7, when Jay Carney was asked whether or not members of Congress had been fully briefed about the NSA surveillance program. Roll that clip, Brittany.
You mentioned the President's comments on Friday. To follow on what Jessica was asking about oversight. On Friday, you referred to that. The President said, quote, every member of Congress has been briefed on this program. why then, or not just Republicans, but Democrats like Keith Ellison saying, I've heard nothing about this. He said he checked his email, he had his staff go back through records. He hasn't been briefed on it.
I can't speak to individual members. What I can tell you is that
a member of Congress has been briefed on it.
The chair and ranking member of the Intelligence Committee have made clear that every member was advised of this and had the opportunity for briefings. As was widely reported over the weekend, the Department of Justice and intelligence officials have taken multiple actions to inform members of these authorities, including providing in-person briefings and classified white papers. The classified white papers were provided by the Intelligence Committees in December of 2009 and 2011, along with a formal request that the white papers be made available for review by all members. The Intelligence and Judiciary Committees have been briefed on these operations multiple times and have been provided access to copies of the classified FISA court orders and opinions relevant to the use of Section 215. I would point you to statements by other members of Congress about the fact that this congressional oversight exists. Again, I can't speak to every individual member. What I can say is that it is simply true that there is substantial congressional oversight.
There he was, twisting and turning. First he said everybody knows, then he said some people know, then he can't speak for everybody knowing. There's Jay Carney making a mess of whether or not members of Congress were fully briefed about the NSA. And then there's number 6. Everybody could see that James Clapper was lying to Congress when he said that the NSA only collects data, doesn't wittingly collect data about the American people. And Jay Carney was one of the few people who actually defended James Clapper. Roll clip 6, Brittany.
Well, he certainly believes that Director Clapper has been straight and direct in the answers that he's given and has actively engaged in an effort to provide more information about the programs that have been revealed through the leak of classified information.
Because even James Clapper said it was the least untruthful statement. He acknowledged that it wasn't fully truthful.
Well, I'm not sure which statement you're talking about.
This was the statement that I was referring to in the March hearing where he was asked specifically whether I have the direct language, does the U.S. collect any type of data on all of the millions of Americans? And he said the answer to that was no. He later sort of amended it, but even in a conversation with Andrew Mitchell this weekend, he acknowledged that it was the least untruthful answer that he could get.
Look, I think Director Clapper has, and the last week has demonstrated this, been aggressive in providing as much information as possible.
Yes, Mr. Carney, he provided information that he said was untruthful. And you have the member of the press saying, but James Clapper himself said he was gave an untruthful statement. Why are you defending him on behalf of the president? I got to say, that's got to be a classic Jay Carney lie. And then there is number 5. Do you remember when they said that the IRS scandal, it all emanated from a couple of rogue agents in Cincinnati? Roll clip 5, Brittany.
On the economy, Joe, he's not focused on pretend scandals, right? That Republicans on Capitol Hill want to turn into partisan skirmishes. Yeah.
Jay, I want to get to the economy because obviously that's the most important thing. We have to clean up this one thing, though. I mean, you say that there's cherry-picked information on the site. Let's just take the IRS scandal. The fact is it's far different than what you said. At the beginning, you said it was just the Cincinnati office, and then we find out more people in Washington are involved, and then this past week we found out, despite what any of us think of the investigations on Capitol Hill, and I see you smiling, I don't know that there's anything to smile about, that it wasn't a couple of crazy people in Cincinnati, that this information actually went up to the chief counsel of the IRS, which was one of 2 political appointees by the President of the United States in the entire IRS. So it doesn't sound phony to me, Jay.
Joe, I greatly appreciate that is the line that is being pushed by Republicans who want Washington to be focused on scandals instead of the economy. But the facts are, wait, Joe,
that doesn't work.
These comments are just unbelievable.
You said, Jay, that this was limited to Cincinnati. That wasn't true. No. I want to talk about the economy, but talk to me. Don't give me talking points, because that doesn't work on this show. And you've been here long enough to know it doesn't work on this show.
Okay.
So
there was Jay Carney in the hot seat on that one with not much wiggle room. You know, this IRS scandal, I was saying cancer, it is a cancer and a scandal. The more we learn about it, the higher up the chain of command it goes, and those 2 lovely agents in the Cincinnati office were so charming and sympathetic, we can clearly see that they were not the ones who were the purveyors of this scandal, Mr. Carney. Well, there's always number 4, when Jay Carney tried to tell us that the IRS report that was issued about the scandal was a complete revelation to the president and to top White House staffers. That, they initially didn't know much about it, and then we realized piece by piece how many of the people close to the president really knew about it. Roll clip 4, Brittany.
Participated in the failings are held responsible, and that the activity doesn't happen again.
But what I don't understand is if the White House felt comfortable with the counsel, the chief of staff, and other members of the senior staff knowing about this report, even very broadly, and was not concerned that just the mere fact of knowing it created the potential for interference, why couldn't the president have also just known that this was coming without interfering?
Well, again, because it's a judgment, in this case, the judgment of the White House counsel, that this is not a matter that you should, or that she should convey to the president. And that was her opinion that she expressed to other members of the senior staff.
Well, first they had said that nobody close to the president knew. Then they had to backtrack and say the White House counsel knew. And, of course, I've got to say, this one is a legendary Jay Carney lie. That's the one where he tells us that Benghazi happened, in prehistoric times. Roll that clip, Brittany.
Last thing on Benghazi, since the president spoke yesterday briefly about that, the Defense Department and the State Department both have written letters, as I understand it, to Republican Darrell Issa saying that they're not aware of anyone coming to them asking for security clearances for their counsel or anything to come forward. First, is that your understanding? And second, if someone were to come forward, if they just haven't technically told their superior or something, if they were to come forward, is the White House willing to let them testify?
Well, again, I mean, that's a hypothetical, but let's be clear. Benghazi happened a long time ago. We are unaware of any agency blocking an employee who would like to appear before Congress to provide information related to Benghazi.
Sean Smith.
It's absolutely incredible. Incredible. Benghazi happened, so long ago. Their memories are all going fuzzy. And then there's number 2. Do you remember when they tried to tell us that nobody tampered with the Benghazi talking points that were issued by Obama and Hillary? Grab a drink and listen to this classic Jay Carney lie. Roll clip number 2.
John. Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
Well, I appreciate the question again, and I think that what I was referring to was the talking points that the CIA drafted and sent around, to which one change was made. And I accept that stylistic may not precisely describe a change of one word to another.
No, I'm just... These were undergoing extensive changes after they were written by the CIA. Sure. These were concerns that were raised by the State Department that the White House directed the interagency process to use in making these talking points.
Well, I think
the CIA original version included references to Al-Qaeda, references to Ansar al-Islam. The original CIA version.
Well, it's obvious that Jay Carney believes that quote-unquote stylistic changes means drawing a big line along the words Al-Qaeda and terrorist attack. That's just the omission of stylistic changes. And here we come to the number 1 Jay Carney lie or dodge. Brittany, can you roll the drum? This is when even reporters start laughing in your face, as Jay Carney tells us that immigration reform is going to raise wages for the American worker.
Is an immigration part of the economy?
It is. But I have no more details.
As you say often.
In fact, comprehensive immigration reform, I'm sure this is of interest to at least one reporter, would significantly reduce our deficit, would expand economic growth, would raise wages, and would enhance our, the creation of innovative businesses by...
You know that you're in big trouble, Mr. Carney, when members of the press corps start laughing in your face. They're going, you know what? This is not Jay Leno here. You're supposed to be the White House press secretary. You're not supposed to be a comedian. Everybody knows that immigration reform will not raise wages. Well, Mr. Carney, if you had any self-respect, you would resign. Instead, you are willing day after day to lie for this administration. We have given the American people a sample of your repeated lies. So, you are a liar, you are paid to do so, and I think we have to concur that Daryl Issa is right. Mr. Jay Carney is nothing other than a paid liar. You are listening to Dr. Grace, crying out for truth and justice in a zombie nation. I'm here to uphold all the values that will never die, beginning with the cardinal value to tell the truth to the American people.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
You've been thunderstruck. Thunderstruck. Yeah, thunderstruck. Thunderstruck.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace, and you're all going to be thunderstruck in the next segment because we're about to interview a great American, one of the most brilliant Americans.
News of the day.
He is actually a former Canadian who now defends everything American. He is Jeffrey T. Cooner, a columnist at the Washington Times, the president of the Edmund Burke Institute, a talk show host up in Boston on WRKO, and he also happens to be my husband. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Dr. Grace.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Now, I full disclosure, I don't know if my wife is going to be happy with me knowing that I'm speaking with such a beautiful woman.
Well, I think that your wife will accept it this one time, Jeff.
I have a very jealous wife. I just want to warn you. So if you get crazy emails or death threats from her, don't blame me.
You know, Jeff, even as I'm introducing you, I think of you now as an American. I know that on your show, they make such an issue of the fact that you're of Canadian origins, but you have completely embraced this country. You uphold its values all the time. Can you tell us how you made that switch, really? I mean, from being a Canadian raised in a really liberal state to being such a champion of everything American, the American Constitution, American history. How did that happen to you?
Well, I mean, you kind of nailed it, Dr. Grace. What my enemies in Boston, I guess they're not able to refute my arguments. They're not able to debate me on the merits of my points of view. And so they play the nativist card. And they constantly go after the fact that somehow I was originally born in Canada. Now, these are the very same people, by the way, may I remind the audience, that when it comes to giving amnesty to illegal Mexicans or illegal Guatemalans or illegal Bolivians, it's no problem. Come on down. You want to give welfare to jihadists from Chechnya? No problem. Come on down. But if you happen to be born north of the border, come into the country legally, get a H-1B visa, get another H-1B visa, get a green card, pay $25,000 in total, revere the Constitution, revere American history, abide by the rule of law, abide by all of the rules set forth by American immigration, pay your taxes, raise a family, adopt 2 American children, one from Minnesota, one from Utah, suddenly it's held against you because you're originally from Canada.
Yeah, but
the
Jeff, I think
the hypocrisy of the left on this is absolutely unbelievable.
It's true. I think that a lot of people would be interested to know, though, Jeff, how it is that you, who really grew up in a liberal Canadian state, became such an aficionado of everything American and such a conservative. How did it happen? Why don't you explain it to the audience?
Well, I think really fundamentally it goes to the fact that my parents came from Eastern Europe. that they came from what is today the former Yugoslavia in Croatia. My grandparents fled communist persecution. They were put in communist concentration camps. And so for my family, the Cold War was not just something that was external. The Cold War was not just something that was an abstract concept. We lived it. We breathed it. It was there at the dinner table. It affected our families. We lost many family members. So, like many people whose families came from Eastern Europe, fleeing communist persecution, fleeing the atrocities committed by the Red Army, we look to the United States as the guarantor of freedom, as the only country left that would defend the free world against what we knew to be the barbarism of the evil empire and of communism. And so I grew up admiring Ronald Reagan. To this day, I believe he is the greatest president of the 20th century. And my grandfather, and I'll never forget this, constantly reminded me that the hope of human freedom, the hope of liberty, the hope of the future of the West no longer lies in Europe, no longer lies in Great Britain or France or any of the great European countries. It lies in one country alone, and that is the United States of America.
Oh,
And
Jeff, I thought the hope of mankind was President Barack Obama. What are you talking to me about?
Well, I mean, that's, to me, he's the anti-Reagan. To me, in many ways, he is the socialist antichrist that I believe is slowly destroying this country, piece by piece, perverting its foundations, perverting its true nature, perverting its true mission. He is trying to turn this country into a socialist superstate. He is turning it into a socialist empire, a soft police state. He is destroying the American economy, destroying our healthcare system.
But, Jeff, you don't understand. He is simply, as his defenders would say, he is managing a decline that is inevitable. Why won't you accept reality, his defenders will say?
Well, this is, I think, at the heart of the liberal project. The liberals really, and they said the same thing during Reagan. I remember this very clearly. America is a power in decline. Its best days are behind it. And you can either manage this decline or you can fight against reality. That was their argument. I disagree. I believe that decline is not a fate, it is a choice. And this president has been determined to create, in his own words, a post-American world. And this is why he has destroyed our healthcare system. He has now soaked the rich. He has assaulted entrepreneurs. He has assaulted businesses. He has assaulted the Constitution. He has assaulted patriotism. He has hollowed out our military. He is systematically destroying this country piece by piece by piece.
And you know, it's funny, Jeff, because when you spoke about the golden days of Ronald Reagan, I've already begun to forget this America that used to be the beacon of the world. So you have really eloquently summarized both the past and the present that we are experiencing. But you know, today I want to talk about this brilliant piece that you wrote recently in World Tribune. You have come to the defense of Senator Rand Paul. He apparently is being attacked. Can you explain what's going on? Why is he being attacked?
To put it bluntly, I believe that Rand Paul is the Reagan of our time. He may not have Reagan's charisma. He may not have Reagan's charm. He may not have Reagan's sense of humor. But what he has are Reagan's principles. And he is committed to scaling back the state. He is committed to limited government. He is committed to restoring the Constitution. He is committing to ending these reckless deficits that threaten to destroy and bankrupt this country. He wants to cut taxes across the board. He will unleash the free enterprise, free market system. He will end our imperial wars overseas. He will end the debacle in Afghanistan. He will end the debacle in Iraq. He will stop arming al-Qaeda in Syria. He will get to the bottom of what happened in Benghazi. In other words, he will put America first.
So why, apparently, you have now a fissure within the conservative movement. You have the pro-Senator Rand Paul camp, and those are trying to destroy his candidacy even before it gets off the ground. What the hell is going on?
Well, I think what's been going on is that there has been a battle waging now really for the last 20 years. When Reagan left the office, when Reagan left the presidency, you had a fight between the conservative traditionalists in the Reagan tradition, the small government, Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, Jesse Helms tradition, against the Republican elites, the establishment Republicans. They are pro-war. They are pro-free trade. They are what they call big government conservatives or Great Society Republicans. They coalesced around Bush 43, and they're the ones that gave us the debacle in Iraq. They're the ones that gave us nation building in Afghanistan. They're the ones that forced No Child Left Behind. They're the ones that gave us the prescription drug benefit. They're the ones that began TARP and Bailout Nation. In other words, they are the ones that clearly, and to me unequivocally, set up Barack Obama's presidency. And with these neoconservatives who masquerade as conservatives, but really in a sense are right-wing liberals, what they don't like about Rand Paul is his opposition to military interventionism and to the American empire that has been created over the last 20 years.
But that's not what they're putting in the window. That's not really what the charge is. Apparently, National Review's Jonah Goldberg is opening up a different flank. Can you tell us what he's saying about Rand Paul?
It was a shocking piece. It was Jonah Goldberg in National Review, which used to be a very fine conservative publication, along with Michael Gerson in the Washington Post, who was one of George W. Bush's chief speechwriters. They have opened up an assault on Rand Paul from the right. And their argument is that he has an aide by the name of Jack Hunter, who's now been forced to step down. Who is Jack Hunter, many of your listeners may be asking. Jack Hunter is an aide to Rand Paul, who over 20 years ago was a radio shock jock in the South, and he called himself the Southern Avenger. And he would go in front of a microphone as a radio talk show host, literally put on a wrestling-style mask, and he would make sort of outlandish comments praising the assassination of Lincoln. He would drink and toast John Wilkes Booth for having assassinated Lincoln. And so the neocons, the Republican war hawk elites, have seized upon the comments that Hunter made over 20 years ago, which he has since said, look, I was immature. I said things I shouldn't have said. I said it mostly in jest. I regret having said it, and I'm a different man now than I was then. And most importantly, I'm not a racist. I abhor racism. I've never espoused, said, or done anything racist in my life. Well, not able to go after Rand Paul because his record on race is absolutely impeccable. They then try to assault him through guilt by association.
Right, and what you're trying to say and what you're really decrying, too, is this whole idea that they are, and I'm quoting from your piece, they are self-appointed arbiters of what is permitted. The likes of Jonah Goldberg, the like of National Review, they basically read a couple of folks right out of the conservative movement, like Pat Buchanan, like the late Robert Novak, like Ann Coulter, and they basically present themselves as a politically correct version of what is respectable conservative opinion. Isn't that really what you're saying? That we have kind of a flank within the conservative movement that is oppressive?
They're traitors. They are politically correct conservatives who crave the respectability of the liberal media elites. And so they always have to overthrow one conservative or throw a conservative overboard or shoot him or her in the back to try to prop up their supposed respectable bona fides. So they destroyed Pat Buchanan. They destroyed the late Robert Novak. They've tried to destroy Ann Coulter. And what was their crime? Take somebody like Pat Buchanan or the late Robert Novak. They opposed the war in Iraq. And when everything has been said and done, who was right and who was wrong? Well, Buchanan and Novak and myself were right. We said that imperial nation building in Iraq, in a country with no tradition of democracy, with deep sectarian divisions, would not work. It is a recipe for protracted guerrilla war and disaster. And the question I have for all of these Republican war hawks is, after 4,000 American dead, 35,000 wounded, many of them maimed and crippled for the rest of their lives, we spent nearly $1 trillion in the deserts in Iraq to try to build a democracy. It is all falling apart now. And now they want to go after Rand Paul because he doesn't want to replicate the same mistakes in Libya or in Egypt or in Syria or, God forbid, in Iran. It is a path to national suicide.
Yes, and you know what? You are so right, Jeff, on so many levels. We thank you for the interview. What you are really saying, apart from your defense of Rand Paul, is that we should be able to truly have a wide variety of opinion, even within the conservative movement, especially to say things like we truly need to curtail the state. Part of curtailing the state is to curtail our far-flung empire. So there you go. That was Jeff Kuhner striking thunder within the conservative movement, striking thunder in North Carolina, and defending the Constitution, defending freedom of speech, freedom of opinion within the conservative movement. I applaud you. Check out his piece on worldtribune.com. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at World Tribune, and you're listening on WTSB.
You're listening to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. Brittany and I were just rocking out to that song. We love that song. Remember when the Democrats played this at their convention when Bill Clinton was riding high? It ended up being a theme of his initial victory. And it was such a hopeful song. We also had so much hope coming from Barack Obama's initial 2008 campaign. But, you know, in reality, instead of giving us hope, what Democrats are mostly interested in giving us is constant and unceasing change. And they're not also interested in giving us truth. What they're interested in is a very specific agenda to slowly bring about, it's a slow motion socialism. One of the key progenitors of this idea about bringing about slow motion communism is actually Saul Alinsky himself. He was a writer and a community activist. He became extremely influential in the 1960s, and he wrote a key book just before he died. Many of you have heard about it. It's called The 12 Rules for Radicals. And what is this book about? What does it intend to do? Well, what he says in the opening graph is, quote, "What follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. The Prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals is written for the have-nots on how to take it away." End of quote. It's extremely important for the American people to understand that the Democrats are not interested in empowering the middle class. They're not interested in actually fixing the economy. They're not really interested in addressing any of the major problems that plague America. What they're interested in is implementing a radical agenda. And the more we know about their tactics, the more we can combat it. So that is why I want to highlight some of the tactics that Saul Alinsky told the radicals to use, and that we can see that they are constantly using. For example, one of the tactics is this: the threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Well, you remember when Obama was drumming up so much fear and loathing about the sequester? That's an example. Augmenting a threat so that the people's imaginations are all stirred up and so that he gets to do what he wants to do. It's not actually about promoting the truth. Another tactic is this: keep the pressure on, never let up. Well, we see the Democrats doing this all the time. For example, we talked about the pressure that they're putting on the military establishment. They're not even listening to the women in the establishment who are saying, we don't want integration. We don't want to be going forward in combat positions, infantry combat positions. So the object here is not efficiency and it's not truth. It's about keeping the pressure on so they can continue to radicalize every aspect of the society. And we see that also when we're talking about the economy. They're putting tremendous pressure on the economy by racking up massive deficits. Ultimately, that's going to compel dramatic change. What about another tactic that Saul Alinsky preaches? A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. And that, too, you see the president doing very bizarre things, like in one speech saying we're going to eliminate all our armaments, we're going to reduce nuclear armaments with Russia, then another speech talking about dramatically helping the environment. I mean, those are two huge, massive projects. And are they realistic? Are they possible? Should the president be advocating all these big plans and big schemes all the time? No. And it's not even going to happen. He's not even going to actually be able to implement those. But the point is that he just wants to keep Americans talking about different issues, radical concepts, dramatic change, at the same time that prepares them for the dramatic change that they're doing in other areas. So this is part of their tactic. Don't become old news. Use different strategies. Keep mixing it up. Again, the object is not about pursuing one policy or two policies that are really good and beneficial. It's always about promoting dramatic, radical change. And let's look at another one. I think this is the one that all of you are most familiar with. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. And you will see that often Democrats are going to use ridicule and satire against their opponents instead of dealing with the truth in debate, instead of actually debating the merits of a case. I think we saw that most brilliantly when Joe Biden said to a group of African Americans, they're going to keep you all back in chains. I mean, that's just ridicule, satire. They're making a caricature of the opposition instead of really presenting the Republican point of view and having an honest debate. This really brings me to my personal story. As many of you know, I was a professor at Howard University and other universities for many years, and I taught students. I taught students about debate. I taught students how to present a good argument in print, how to make a good argument vocally. And did I say stuff like Saul Alinsky is saying? All that Saul Alinsky is really teaching is how to promote incessant lies. And I think when we talk about the degeneration of our politics, it's because so much of it has been infiltrated by this Saul Alinsky radical approach to dialogue. And that is what's so frustrating. Well, when I was teaching my students how to speak, I taught them the very opposite. I used to say to them, if somebody gives you an argument, what is the best way to defeat the argument? Is it to ridicule it? Is it to satirize it? Is it to mock it? No. The best thing to do is to take their argument and first state an even better version of it than they have stated. Take their argument up to the highest level and then defeat it. That is the most dramatic defeat of all. And why does that work so well? Because it's founded in a great courtesy for your opponent. It also illustrates your own tremendous learning. And it's rooted in respect for the opposition. We need a hell of a lot more of that in America today. You are listening to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. Tune in every week from 3 to 4 as I uphold values that will never die.
I was born by God's dear grace in an extraordinary place where the stars and stripes and the eagle flies.
This is America's voice for conservative values, Dr. Grace.